The company card died at 2:13 a.m. in a hotel lobby in Singapore. Not declined. Not temporarily unavailable. Dead. The front desk clerk gave me that polite little smile people use when they're trying not to embarrass you in public. Would you like to try another form of payment, Mr. Virelli? Behind me, a German couple stopped arguing long enough to glance over. My suitcase sat beside my leg like an abandoned dog. 23 hours earlier, I'd been leading a crisis recovery for a software rollout worth $80 million. Now I was standing in marble flooring at 2 in the morning with a frozen company card and exactly $214 in my checking account. Yeah. That didn't sit right. I stepped away from the desk and checked my phone. No warning. No message from accounting. No email from corporate travel. Just one new notification from my boss, Darnell Kruse. Need you to remain overseas until further notice. Budget controls active. Figure it out. Figure it out. That was Darnell's favorite phrase. Guy used it like a personality. I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary, and somewhere in the back of my mind, something finally clicked into place. Not anger. Not panic. Pattern recognition. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was escalation. And the funny thing about people like Darnell is they never realize how predictable they are right before they screw themselves. 3 months earlier, I was still pretending things at Halcyon Dynamics were normal. That's the dangerous phase in bad companies. Not when everything explodes. When everyone's still smiling. I'd been with Halcyon 11 years. Senior Infrastructure Strategist. Fancy title for the guy who fixed disasters nobody else understood. I built recovery frameworks. Negotiated foreign vendor relationships. Cleaned up executive stupidity in multiple time zones. Quietly. Always quietly. Meanwhile, Darnell got promoted twice. He came from sales leadership. One of those tall, lacquered guys who treated confidence like expertise. Expensive loafers. White teeth. Spoke in LinkedIn posts. He loved saying things like high-performance culture, while assistants were crying in bathrooms. At first, I thought he just didn't understand operations. Then I realized something worse. He understood perfectly. People like Darnell survive by standing near competent people while making them invisible. And buddy, I was invisible as hell. I noticed it in meetings first. I'd explain a technical risk. Darnell would nod slowly, then repeat the same thing 30 seconds later in simpler words, like he'd translated it for children. The executives would thank him. I'd sit there sipping cold coffee like, sure, whatever. Then came the travel assignments. Singapore. Frankfurt. Toronto. Always me. Always last minute. Always framed like opportunity. You're the only one we trust with this stuff, Renwick. That was the line. Funny how exploitation always arrives wearing compliments. I didn't complain because honestly, I needed the job. After my divorce, I'd spent 2 years rebuilding my finances from scratch. My younger sister, Corinne, was going through chemo in Boise, and I was helping with bills where I could. So I swallowed things. A lot of things. The skipped bonuses. The credit theft. The little humiliations. Darnell once introduced me to a client as our back-end wizard. Wizard. I was 46 years old with 2 certifications the room barely understood, and this clown was talking about me like I lived under a bridge making potions. Everyone laughed. So did I. That's survival sometimes. You learn which parts of yourself to temporarily kill. The only person who ever said anything was Nadia Bell. Senior Compliance Analyst. Sharp enough to cut glass. We started grabbing late dinners after project calls because we were usually the last people awake in the building anyway. One night she looked at me over cold Thai food and said, "You know he's terrified of you, right?" I almost laughed. "Darnell? He can't do what you do. So he keeps you exhausted instead." That one stayed with me. Because deep down, I already knew. The Singapore assignment started as a catastrophe. Halcyon had rushed a logistics platform into Southeast Asia without proper testing because Darnell promised investors an aggressive launch timeline during earnings season. Translation: they lied. By the second week, distribution systems were failing across 3 ports. Containers weren't clearing customs properly. Clients were threatening lawsuits. Darnell volunteered me before I even knew there was a meeting. Renwick thrives under pressure. Of course he said that from Chicago while I was eating airport noodles in Terminal C. For 12 straight days, I worked 18-hour shifts with regional teams trying to stop the bleeding. And here's the thing nobody tells you about corporate crises. The real panic isn't loud. It's quiet people whispering in hallways while executives suddenly stop replying in writing. That's when I started noticing something weird. Financial approvals were disappearing. Vendor payments delayed. Travel budgets frozen selectively. Not company-wide. Targeted. Mostly around people connected to operational failures. At first I assumed cash flow issues. Then I saw an internal authorization chain with Darnell's name all over it. He was rerouting expense accountability. Offloading blame. Creating distance. Classic corporate arson. Start the fire, then rearrange the exits. I probably would have ignored it if he hadn't made one stupid mistake. Mine. Back in the hotel lobby, I finally got a hold of accounting after 40 minutes. The woman sounded nervous before she even spoke. "Mr. Virelli, your corporate privileges were suspended yesterday." "By who?" Long pause. Then quieter. "Executive authorization." I actually smiled. Not because it was funny. Because suddenly everything made sense. Darnell wasn't just abandoning me overseas. He was setting me up as the operational scapegoat before quarterly review. If the Singapore rollout collapsed publicly, they needed someone technical to blame. Someone expendable. Someone already isolated. Me. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the hotel bed, and opened my laptop. Then I called Nadia. She answered immediately. "You saw it too, didn't you?" she asked. That told me everything. Over the next hour, she walked me through what compliance had quietly discovered. Unauthorized reporting edits. Shifted liability chains. Missing approval records. And one particularly ugly document showing Darnell had overridden multiple deployment warnings before launch. Warnings I had submitted. That's when the exhaustion disappeared. Fear too. Because for the first time in 11 years, I realized something important. I wasn't trapped. Darnell was. He just didn't know it yet. The preparation phase took 6 days. 6 very careful days. I moved to a cheaper hotel 2 train stops away and paid cash like some middle-aged Jason Bourne with lower back pain. Nadia helped assemble documentation trails from Chicago while I coordinated with regional vendors who were furious enough to cooperate freely. Turns out when executives ignore international compliance laws, people keep receipts. Who knew? I barely slept. But emotionally? I felt strangely calm. There's a point after prolonged humiliation where fear burns out and clarity replaces it. I wasn't trying to destroy Darnell. That's the part people misunderstand. I just stopped protecting him. Big difference. The trigger came faster than expected. Halcyon scheduled an emergency global operations call the following Thursday. And Darnell, God bless his ego, decided to make an example out of me publicly. Over 200 employees on the call. Executives. Regional leads. Legal observers. I was muted initially while Darnell delivered one of his polished little funeral speeches. We experienced unfortunate implementation failures at the operational level. Operational level. Cute. Then he brought me live. Renwick, he said, voice smooth as bourbon commercials, would you like to explain why protocol compliance failed under your supervision? There it was. The knife. Public. Clean. Deliberate. For a second nobody spoke. I could hear keyboard clicking through somebody's bad headset. Then I said, very calmly. Sure. But first, I think legal should review the suppressed deployment warnings from March 11 through April 2. Silence. Real silence this time. Not corporate silence. Human silence. Darnell tried to recover immediately. I'm not aware of. I have the authorization records open right now, I said. Including executive overrides tied directly to your credentials. Another pause. Then somebody from legal jumped in. What documents are we discussing? And buddy. That's when the floor disappeared beneath him. For the next 43 minutes, the meeting transformed from performance theater into live dissection. I forwarded archived emails. Approval timestamps. Compliance warnings. Vendor escalations. Everything. Neat. Organized. Impossible to spin. Darnell kept trying to interrupt, but panic had started cracking through his voice. You could hear it. Little fractures. People like him rely on social gravity. Confidence. Momentum. Once that slips, everybody suddenly notices the smell of smoke. Then Nadia joined the call. I'll never forget that moment. Calm as winter. She explained that compliance had already initiated internal review procedures due to irregular authorization activity linked to executive management. Linked to executive management. Professional language for, oh, this dude is cooked. One executive asked why I'd remained overseas after my card privileges were revoked. I answered honestly. Because I was told to figure it out. That landed harder than anything else. No yelling. No dramatic speeches. Just truth sitting naked in the room. And truth has weight when everyone already suspects something's wrong. The call ended abruptly after legal requested immediate executive suspension protocols. Translation. Darnell got escorted out before lunch. The fallout spread ugly and fast. Trade publications picked up rumors about the failed rollout. Internal audits uncovered broader financial manipulation tied to investor reporting timelines. Apparently Darnell had been massaging operational risk metrics for almost a year. The board needed containment. Fast. I expected some heroic moment afterward. Apologies. Recognition. Maybe a dramatic office scene where people finally admitted I mattered. That's not how real life works. Mostly it was awkward. People avoided eye contact for a week. Executives suddenly used my full title correctly. One guy who ignored me for 6 years started saying, "Great insight," during meetings like we were old friends. Corporate guilt is hilarious that way. Nadia and I had drinks the night I finally flew home. Cheap whiskey bar near O'Hare. Snow coming down outside. "You okay?" she asked. I thought about it for a while. Then shrugged. "I think I'm just tired of surviving rooms." She nodded slowly like she understood exactly what I meant. Because she did. A month later, Halcyon offered me a director position. Big raise. Retention bonus. Formal apology language drafted by lawyers who probably billed by the syllable. I declined. Not dramatically. Just cleanly. See, the thing nobody tells you after vindication is this. Once people show you the machinery behind the walls, you can't pretend the building feels safe anymore. I took a consulting role instead. Smaller firm. Less prestige. Better humans. Corinne finished treatment that spring. Nadia still sends me sarcastic screenshots from corporate webinars whenever executives say, "We're a family." And every once in a while, usually late at night in airports, I think about that hotel lobby in Singapore. About the dead company card. About standing there humiliated and stranded while strangers watched. Funny thing is, I used to think that was the lowest point. Turns out it was the first honest moment I'd had in years. Because sometimes the worst thing people can do to you is finally remove the illusion that they were ever on your side.